I'm currently a PhD student at Maastricht University, and I've been doing my work there on ayahuasca as well as 5-MeO-DMT. And it's kind of a funny story how I got into all of this, because my initial research was on ayahuasca. But basically I went on this conference in Berlin, and I was just going to go there to meet up with my supervisors, Jordi Riba and Jan Ramaekers. And then when we were having like a casual coffee, Jordi was like, hey Malin, you should look into 5-MeO-DMT. And at that point I had no clue what it was, and so I did what I do best. I went to Google everything and just read a lot about it. And I stumbled across a YouTube video from the last breaking convention, and the speaker there was Raphael. And so that's how we got in contact, because I decided to write him afterwards, and I was like, hey, we should talk about 5-MeO-DMT. So here we are, and we have produced a great bunch of research together, and I can only look forward to the rest. So I just want to also take a moment to just give the acknowledgement to the other co-authors on the paper I'm going to present today, their prospective examination of synthetic 5-MeO-DMT vapor inhalation and its effect on salivary IL-6, cortisol levels, as well as affect and non-judgement. And those included, besides Raphael, Attila Sabo at the University of Oslo in Norway. Also, Alan Davis was part of this, and of course my supervisors, Jordi and Jan Ramaeker. So let's just give them a hand of applause, okay? Now, like Raphael gave a great introduction to the topic, but I'm just going to mention that 5-MeO-DMT can be found in plants, but also in large concentrations in the secretion from the toad in the Sonarian desert called Bufo alvarius. And this has led to a lot of use of toad secretion in the underground. And even though a lot of people have benefited from that use, there are some in that equation that haven't, and that's the toads. And I'm not going to go into great detail about it. I just want to let you know about the opinion paper that I wrote on the topic for Psychedelics Today. And it basically is about the ethical and ecological considerations of using toad secretion. I kind of like wrote this paper because during my field work, I kind of like became aware of this paradox happening. Like, people would go to these sessions and they were going after like a spiritual experience. They wanted to like clear off symptoms of distress that they were enduring, but at the potential cost of a species on the planet. And so I decided to dive deeper into this, and everything that I found out is in this paper. But essentially, the takeaway message is illustrated on this design I'm going to show you right now. And in the quote, "Save a toad, exploit a chemist." So instead of using toad secretion, let's just switch to the synthetic kind, because it's pretty much the same thing. Previous research has shown that if you use 5-MeO-DMT, there are betterments in effects of mental health related disorders. And also it can evoke the experience of mystical experience, similar to the intensity with high-dose psilocybin. It has also shown to evoke the experience of ego dissolution. And from the paper co-authored by another great person here at the conference, Stevens Wren, found that it can inhibit cell death, brain lesion, inflammation, and induce neuroplasticity. Then this particular paper by Attila Sabo shows that it also might have immunomodulatory potential via the sigma-1 receptor. And actually, I had the pleasure of meeting Attila in Beyond Psychedelics in Prague last year. And there we were just like started to talk and walked around in the conference hall and also outside. And I think during the 30 minutes we spent together, we came up with the design as well as the objectives for this particular research. And what we wanted to figure out, like by merging together my naturalistic observational design with his like biomedical take on looking into the psychedelics potential, we wanted to look into if 5-MeO-DMT has any effect on stress and inflammatory immune function, so in salivary samples. And we also want to continue exploring whether it would have any effects on depression, anxiety, and stress-related symptoms, also mindfulness-related capacities, and satisfaction with life. And we also wanted to see whether, if there was any changes in mental health variables, if they were related to the intensity of the psychedelic experience, and also if it was correlated with the stress and immune system response. We went about this by using a naturalistic observational design, which has come to characterize most of my studies, all of them. And basically, it allows us to bypass a lot of paperwork with all the restrictions around studying psychedelics. It makes it quite difficult to study them because they're Schedule I. And so with this, we can also get a legal framework to conduct these studies. And it gives us a peek at what 5-MeO-DMT and other psychedelics, such as ayahuasca, is doing. And we basically took baseline immediately post-session and 7 days follow-up measures using a test battery. And it included the following questionnaires and also demographics. So we distributed the depression, anxiety, and stress scale, the satisfaction with life scale, and also a questionnaire assessing mindfulness-related capacities. Also, we distributed the Ego Dissolution inventory and the 5-dimensional altered states of consciousness rating scale. And we also collected salivary samples before and within 2 hours after the people had had their session. A little bit of a spoiler here, just because I'm really excited about other projects too, is that salivary samples were not the only thing that we collected, but we also collected DBS, dried blood spots, and urine samples before and after, but we are currently analyzing all of that, and we're writing it up in a paper, so I hope it will be out by the end of the year, but it's going to be a really nice one. Yeah, regarding the study procedure, so this particular project was a step up from what I've done before by only giving out test batteries, questionnaires, and now I had to do biomedical sampling as well, and also observe 4 2-hour sessions per day. And I was like, this is way too much. So I asked Rafael to come to Prague, and he came over, and together we kind of just distributed all the tasks that needed to be done in this data collection. And this is just a photo of some of the materials that we had. And we also collected a sample of the 5-MeO-DMT that was used, and it was synthetic. A little bit about the participants. You see, it's not a huge sample. It's only 11 people. But later on, you'll see that the findings we have is quite spectacular, given this tiny sample. So most of them were from Europe, and the mean age was 33. And most of them were males, and all of them had previous experience with psychedelics, but only 2 of them had 5-MeO-DMT before. Whether that was synthetic or toad secretion, I don't know. And also, none of the participants reported having any diagnosis from a clinician. But 4 participants kind of reported self-diagnosis or previous problems with depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. And their motivation of use was kind of varied, it was understand myself, out of curiosity to solve problems, or other reasons that was not listed in the test battery. Here it was explore possibilities. and most of them had a bachelor degree. Yeah, a little bit about the setting of the sessions. So first of all, I just want to let you know a little bit of background information about the facilitator. He was male, and he had also received training in holotropic breathwork, and he had been doing these sessions for about 2-3 years. And he was also just traveling around and offering these sessions to people. And that has its limitations, but I'm not going to go into great detail of that. Essentially, what would happen on the day of the session is that people would arrive to a rented yoga place in Prague, and they would be met there with the facilitator and me as well. So I would take them aside, and they would fill out the test battery and give the biomedical samples. And then I would escort them into the room where they would have their session. And the room would be like, there would be like a mattress on the floor and pillows and everything, and kind of like dim lighting. So it would be a very comfortable and like safe space. And the only people in the room during the session was the facilitator, the participant, and Raphael, because he was taking notes on like the dose and anything like how long people would hold their breath when they were intaking the substance and things like this. So fast forward 4 days, we're done with the data collection. I popped a champagne bottle. I dropped up heaps of samples at a lab in Prague, and also Raphael at the airport in the middle of the night. After that, I could finally relax and just get home and get a good night's sleep, and then just dive into the data set. And I'm really excited about showing you what we found. So here is a table about the dose information that we gathered. Because there has been no dose information from the naturalistic observational studies before, we were really happy that the facilitator agreed to weigh the doses. And so you see here that the doses are very varied between people, and so is the Ego Dissolution score. And we also found that there was no correlation between the doses and the EDI scores. So technically, echoing what Raphael said, is that any dose of 5-MeO-DMT can give you an experience with Ego Dissolution. We also collected some data on adverse reactions, and so 45.5%, 5 people, reported some adverse effects during the session, and these included like feeling scared or fear. One person vomited, and another one just reported like some discomfort in the throat after smoking the vapor. And also on the 7-day follow-up that we had, 3 participants reported that they had like some somatic tension or difficulty sleeping. But this isn't bad. It's kind of like echoing what's coming from the survey study that was presented earlier by Raphael. And basically my theory is what is happening here is that if you were to put this in a therapy session, you know, like 5-MeO-DMT can make things come to the surface that are really difficult and uncomfortable, and you want that to happen because you want to complete this like cycle of trauma, whatever it is, to come to a complete resolution of unresolved things within you. And so what I think is happening here, like, because there are some people reporting somatic tension or difficulty sleeping afterwards, is because maybe they didn't come to a complete resolution of the work that they need to do in order to get better. That's just a personal little theory, and we hope that more research can shed some further light on this. So, what are the effects of 5-MeO-DMT on salivary biomarkers? So, we measured salivary cortisol, IL-6, CRP, and IL-1B. Now, I just want to make it clear that this is not my area of expertise. It's Attila's, so he did the analysis, but he gave me a little explanation of what all of this means. So, The increase in salivary cortisol is not surprising because the autonomic nervous system will have a little bit of a stress response as a result of the inhalation of 5-MeO-DMT. And then the downregulation of salivary IL-6 is really good because it illustrates the anti-inflammatory potential of 5-MeO-DMT that he hypothesized about in his papers. So these are basically biological effects of inhalation of 5-MeO-DMT, which is first time we're seeing this. So this is a great finding and very important for the research going forward. And now, what are the effects of 5-MeO-DMT on affect, mindfulness, and satisfaction with life? I hope you're able to see this, but basically what we found here with anxiety is that there was a reduction that reached significance at 7 days later. With stress, you see the same trend. And also with, let's see here, with depression, there was a significant reduction at post-session. And with non-judgement, which is a mindfulness-related capacity, you see an increase that also persists until follow-up. So this is great. It illustrates the same trend that we've found with other naturalistic studies that I've done with my colleagues in Maastricht on psilocybin and ayahuasca, and also echoes what was brought up in the survey that Raphael presented. Now, are the changes in mental health variables related to the intensity of the psychedelic experience and salivary biomarkers? Before I go into that, I want to just show you the psychedelic experience ratings. And basically, it was a moderate experience with ego dissolution. Here you see it's 51. And similar trends was found with 5D AC dimension ratings. So oceanic boundlessness is, for example, similar to ego dissolution. And it's similar ranges here. It's about 50 to 60%. And then there's another part of the 5D, the subscales. And again, we see the same trend with the ego dissolution inventory. Essentially, we looked into whether the changes in mental health related symptoms were correlated with salivary markers. And basically, I have this little cheat sheet here because it's not my area of expertise and I want to make sure that I get it right. So there was no correlation between the psychedelic experience and IL-6 and cortisol changes. But we found something interesting with the CRP. So CRP is a biomarker of inflammatory as well as IL-6. And we know that inflammation in the system can greatly impact mood, cognition, as well as function. And this could lead to increased feelings of social disconnectedness and self-awareness. And so what we found here was a negative correlation between CRP awareness and non-judgement. And what this essentially is pointing to is in line with previous research showing an inverse correlation between CRP and psychological parameters in mood-related disorders. What we did find, though, is with subjective measures is that there was a correlation between ego dissolution and affect, like measures of depression, anxiety, and stress. So it was a negative correlation there, and that means that the greater the rate of ego dissolution, the lower the ratings of affect. And on the other hand, with non-judgement, you would see the higher the ego dissolution ratings, the higher the score of non-judgement afterwards. Of course, my research is not without limitations. There is several limitations to the naturalistic observational design. And also here we have a lack of placebo control. It was a very small sample, and I hope that we can get some funding to just make a bigger study. And also there was probably that the participants would have social desirability bias and just filling out the questionnaire in the way that I wanted or whatever. So there's that about limitations. Essentially, the conclusion is that inhalation of vaporized synthetic 5-MeO-DMT produces significant changes in inflammatory markers and improved affect and non-judgement. Before I finish, I just want to show you this quote. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And I think it's a nice way to end this, because it kind of like summarizes what we're all here for. We're here to share and learn about psychedelics. And I think it's safe to say that we all believe that they will play a great part in enhancing the treatment model for mood-related disorders as well as trauma. So finally, here's my contact information. If you want to talk about collaborations or anything, send me an email. But if you just want to know what's up, consider liking the Instagram account. Thank you so much for your time.